McCormick Theological Seminary in Chicago is serious about not just being located in the city, but being part of the city. That's why the theme of McCormick Days 2016 is toward a flourishing city, church, community, society. The event takes place October 20th and 21st. Let's welcome three of the guest speakers. Deborah Kapp is the Edward F. and Phyllis K. Campbell Professor of Urban Ministry at McCormick. Robert Beekman serves as a pastor and urban ministry coordinator with the Northern Illinois Conference of the United Methodist Church. And Sean Castleberry is executive director for Mission Year, a national Christian ministry that invites young adults to be a force for justice in the city. Tell us about McCormick Days and what the participants can expect this year.
We have a variety of workshops, a variety of presentations, and we're especially excited about the Reverend Dr. Alan Bosak being with us as our keynote speaker.
What does that mean for Chicago to be a flourishing city, and then how does it relate to churches?
When you talk about flourishing, you're talking about being productive. You're talking about being a place in which people's needs are being met, both those kind of intrinsic needs, as well as those spiritual, economic, and those social needs are being met. And I think that the church really plays a great role in order and about bringing about this kind of flourishing city in partnership with government entities, in partnership with agencies, and in partnerships with the community at large. And so when we talk about being a flourishing city, we're talking about a place where people's needs are being met.
Dr. Castleberry, I was wondering if you can talk to us about what does God's justice look like in a city where the violence continues?
Yes, God is deeply concerned about justice. It's all throughout Scripture. God is talking about his heart for the poor, heart for justice. And as we look at the violence in our city, we can't address the violence without talking about the underlying poverty and the conditions that create violence. And so as I've been working on the west side, south side of Chicago, I realized I can't just be living in the community, I can't just be loving my neighbor if I don't also talk about and address the systems that are creating oppression and injustice. And so that kind of led me into my study at McCormick, actually, to look at mass incarceration, because I started to see that our neighborhood and youth in our neighborhood were disproportionately impacted by mass incarceration, and it created this cycle that would end up continuing to hurt folks in our community. And I started seeing that even though we're the nation of the land of liberty and justice, we have more people incarcerated than any other nation. And that black youth on the west side, south side of Chicago are 46 times more likely to be detained by police than white youth. And realizing that as Christians, as people of faith, we have to address these injustices. And so, that's what I'll be talking about at McCormick Days. We'll talk about how does the church respond to mass incarceration.
And Dr. Castleberry, if I can just kind of piggyback on what you're saying, I think there's some really specific ways in which churches can connect. Oftentimes, one of the things that we've done in the last year or so, we've done an assessment of our churches, an assessment of about 70 churches to find out what kind of ministries they're engaged in. And overwhelmingly, churches were engaged in what we might call mercy ministries, more programming. However, where the rubber really meets the road is around those justice ministries. And the church doesn't have to do it on its own. There are many like-minded, like-missioned organizations that churches can collaborate with in order to really begin to speak to the broader issues of justice, which are as you mentioned, are the underlying causes of many of the conditions that we see. If we feed people but don't really begin to look and shape public policy in ways that eliminates hungers, then we're not going far enough. You know, if we talk about the violence in the community and the violence in the streets, but we really don't begin to look at the kind of public policies that create economic disparities, particularly in the African American communities and communities of colors, then we're not going to be moving towards a flourishing city. And so it takes equal amounts of justice as well as those kind of programmatic and mercy ministries to really be effective.
And Dr. Kapp, do you mind sharing with us about your research on women in ministry and urban ministry? What have you found?
Well, my research is based on some interviews I've done with women in urban ministry. So what I'm hearing about is the everyday work of people on the ground, and they would reinforce what both Sean and Robert have said about the importance of serving not just in ministries of mercy, but also ministries of justice, and also the importance, particularly in the work of building community, which was one of the key things that came out of this, these sets of interviews, the importance of partnership and collaborating with people and not trying to do it all by yourself. The other thing I think that was really emphasized in the particular interviews I had was that ministry is people work, and that we're really working with and for people. And so the need of ministers to know how to do that well and to give themselves a little breathing space in the midst of working with all those people is part of what these interviews have been about.
Dr. Castleberry, can you tell us about Mission Year and how you engage young adults?
We welcome young adults from across the political and theological spectrum to come together and work together and not focus on what their differences are, but what they have in common, and to focus on loving God and loving people and living out justice in the neighborhoods. Young adults right now are very passionate about justice, and they are leaving the church because they don't see churches engaging in issues of justice and standing against oppression. So we have to show young people that faith and justice go hand in hand.
Can you share with us how we bring all of these entities together, church, seminary, community, society, and how do we move forward together? How do we bring justice, just as you were speaking, how do we bring justice and Jesus together and make it so that when we present it to congregations that they are willing to be a part of that type of engagement?
Great question. I think one of the things is that when we step back and we really begin to think about, so what is justice? And I heard justice defined as this, is that justice is what love looks like in the public square. And so therefore, as we begin to move outside of our comfort zones as seminaries, as churches, then what it gives us the opportunity to do is to come together around specific kinds of issues. To say that we want to deal with the racism is a very broad topic, but to really begin to focus and organize and say, I'm going to deal with this particular aspect, whether it be police accountability as it relates to racism, then that's something that churches, that's something that seminaries can begin, seminaries in their role to educate the future pastors and the future faith leaders of our country. It's something that churches, who are those who then would begin to receive and engage lay people and engage the broader community around some of those issues. Those are things that really they can all kind of sink their teeth in to begin to deal with those kinds of issues in order to really affect a positive change in communities, and in all of that then begins to have a positive impact on society. Couple of things that are common threads, if you will, that kind of go through that. One is really engagement, engagement around specific issues. The other is around partnership and building relationships in collaborative kind of ways. And then the third thing is ownership. Engage grassroots people. Mm-hmm. In other words, for me to say this is what you need, that day is gone.
That's right.
But it's really, at its very best, what the church does is the church begins to lift up and provide space for people and for those voices from the margin to be heard in the places where they have the greatest impact. It's not for me to go to City Hall, but it's for me to create a space and empower an individual from my community to be able to go to the mayor and to go to the governor and say, you know, we need to change the way we're looking in terms of the state budget. We need to change city ordinances around policing and around police accountability. How
can someone who's interested participate in McCormick Days?
We would be delighted to have people who are interested show up and come. To register, go to www.mccormick.edu and find the information on McCormick Days, and there is a link through which you can register. And we'd love to have people come, and we can, I think, take people to register right up until the day that it's started.
Thank you, Dr. Catt, Reverend Beekman, and Dr. Castleberry for joining us today. I'm LaShondra Stevens for Different Drummers and the Greater Chicago Broadcast Ministries. Keep the faith.